Brother Edgar brought this recorder and some tapes down, wanted me to record some of my experience in World War II for the future generations, for the nephews, nieces, and so forth. Well, on December the 15th, 1941, I joined the Navy. Just 8 days after Pearl Harbor. I went to San Diego for my boot training and was there for 17 days, just long enough to get all of the shots to immune the ones that's going overseas. Then I went aboard Crescent City. This is a troop transport. And 8 days later, we docked at Pearl Harbor. There I went on the USS Phelps, DD-360, which was a destroyer that was assigned to the Pacific Fleet. 3 days later, we left Pearl Harbor and joined the rest of the fleet and headed to the South Pacific. I was pretty young, and I really didn't know what to expect, just being a farm boy, and so, but I just kind of played it by ear, but I was kind of apprehensive at the best. But it wasn't but a few days till we got into my first battle. And then I began to realize what it was all about and decided that I had made a mistake. But there wasn't much I could do about it then. This Phelps was, its job was to protect the aircraft carriers from submarines and planes the best we could. However, we had 5-inch gun turrets on there, which wasn't the best for shooting planes. This was right at the start of the war, and later they put a bunch of 20 millimeters and 40 millimeters on there that was good for and effective for shooting down the planes. But anyway, we was in several battles. I'll name off all of them that I was in while I was on the Phelps, and then I'll try to describe some of them to where you can understand what was going on or what it takes to fight a naval battle. The Battle of Bougainville. These battles are named after the islands that the Japs was protecting. And of course they wouldn't be fought on the land, they would be fought at sea, and it was our planes against the Jap planes is a rule. And the Jap planes, of course, was trying to sink our aircraft carriers. They were the main target. But occasionally they would come over the escort ships. But we had, in the Pacific Fleet, there was almost always 4 aircraft carriers. So we were pretty well, pretty strong, and pretty well held her own with the Japs on most of the, well, all of the encounters really, except 1 or 2 maybe. But the planes at this time, they wasn't suicide planes, they were just trying to bomb. And they were pretty active, pretty accurate too. Now this was all happening in the first part of 1942, and mostly it was routine chasing subs for the Phelps. But we would occasionally shoot down a plane that came over going for the carrier. But we wasn't in a real hair-raising battle until May the 8th in 1942. And this was the Battle of the CoralSea. This was where the Lexington was sunk on the Japs attacked it early in the morning of the 8th. And there was so many planes, it looked like blackbirds coming out over the fleet. But of course we had 50, 60 ships and they were shooting them down. And we would too. We'd hit one occasionally. When we had gone back into Pearl Harbor, they'd put some 20 and 40 millimeter anti-aircraft guns on there, because at this time they had decided that the war was going to be fought in the air and not on the land. So these 20 and 40 millimeters, they had every other bullet was a tracer, so they could pretty well tell where they were shooting. And we would shoot down planes along with all of the rest of the ships, but where there was hundreds of them, it was attacking our aircraft carriers, and it seemed that they were concentrating on the Lexington. And but they came over real early in the morning, the first wave of them, and they had the Lexington burning on the flight deck. It was from just about the whole flight deck was aflame. But of course the battle didn't last but about 20, 30 minutes. This wave of planes, just wave after wave of them was attacking. And they were doing more missing than they were doing hitting, but the ones that hit was doing some damage. And they got their fire under control on the Lexington. And then about 11 o'clock, well, here come another wave of them. And they had bombed that thing, and they had used up their firefighting equipment earlier in the morning, and the fire had heated the fuel lines, and of course they were trying to refuel our planes that had landed on her after the first early battle, and there was a gasoline line ruptured. I think that was the source of the main fire, and it got out of control, and their firefighting equipment was kind of limited or exhausted. And about 2:30 then they decided they was going to have to abandon it, and did. So all of the ships in the task force started sending over their motor launches and whaleboats to pick up the survivors. Even the Phelps, now we had a 30-foot whaleboat. We had two of them, 30-foot whaleboats on there. We sent a boat over, and at that stage in May in 42, well, of course I hadn't been on the ship very long, hadn't been in the Navy very long really, and I was a flunky back in one of the gun turrets, and the chief gunner's name was Sassy, S-A-S-S-C. So he told me to run down to galley and get us a couple of loaves of bread, and he had some sardines in a footlocker there. Well, of course, everybody was hungry, and I went down there and told Frank Davis, a baker from Mena, Arkansas. And of course, he was, Frank and I had become friends, as well as his brother Don. They were both on the Phelps. But being from Mena, well, we kind of wasn't hard to make friends, because people kind of frowned on the Arkies and Okies at that time, or some of them anyway. But Frank had turned around to get the bread. The executive officer tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We need a bow hook for this boat crew." The boat was being lowered right there by the galley, and just told me to get down there. Well, later on, I got a Navy and Marine Corps medal for helping pick up them survivors, and a citation that came with it read voluntarily, but it wasn't voluntarily. I was ordered down there. But anyway, we picked up most of the crew. I think it was about 200 that was killed on the Lexington during the actual bombing, but the Phelps and all of the rest of the ships, which was probably about 60 ships in the task force, with all of their boats, we got all of the rest of the men out, about 2,400 of them, I believe.